just putting that into perspective, whether it be with billionaires versus, when we're thinking about policy, I often get the comment, so you want to be the next Jeff Bezos. And I don't even a little bit want to be the next Jeff Bezos, other than if he's done a great job, creating a consumer company. That's what I do love about Amazon. And I always just say I'd rather be the next Yvon Chouinard, who recently gave more, I want to say all of his wealth to environmental nonprofits. And so that's the kind of example, right? We want to create this impact at scale, create this revenue at scale. We very intentionally are people plus planet plus profit, not just people and planet over profit. Because I believe the company will be better sustained and our impact will be better sustained, like we talked about at the beginning.
Welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn, and I'm excited to have you join me as I interview community members and business leaders from the communities in which I live, work, and serve through my business Cooler Garage Doors. We're going to bring you highlights on characters in our communities. Why? Because community matters, and I want to know more about who is behind our business and leadership in order to understand and support the community fabric that our relationships make up. And collectively, we can build stronger communities that support our lifestyles, our youth, and our health. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Kuehlhorn. Today, I'm sitting down with a new friend, Rachel Kois, the founder and CEO of Simple Switch. I'm really excited to get into your story, Rachel, and learn more about your company. You're very mission-driven, and I really appreciate that. And I just appreciate your time. Thanks so much for joining.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to it. Your show is a really great spot, and I'm sure your listeners are awesome too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love to give a shout out to my listeners. I'm surprised anytime people are listening, but it's been a really cool journey so far and to watch it grow. And I guess to start out, Rachel, we'll go to kind of the tipping point of all of our conversations. I'm curious to know where you grew up.
I grew up about 15 minutes from this spot. So I am in North Denver now, and I grew up in Broomfield, Colorado, which is just right between Boulder, Denver. I grew up on what we joke is the farm of Broomfield because it was 5-acre little, a little bit of land, but not crazy, but the suburbs and schools grew up right around it. So kind of a little haven in the middle of a lot of growth in that area. So I feel really lucky.
So you grew up on a farm? Like, was it a working farm?
It was not a working farm. So it's only a hobby. We said before we started recording, I still am kind of a hobby homesteader and grew up there. Yes. I was born 1 year before my parents designed and built that house. And we had horses and chickens and all sorts of kind of in and out animals and a lot of gardening.
Okay.
Just a hobby farm, but really lovely place to grow up and venture outside.
It sounds amazing. So as a child, like lots of freedom.
Yeah, I have a favorite story that I haven't told in a while, but that I think really captures who I am. And it's that my parents, so before all of those suburbs and things grew up, there was open space on 3 out of 4 sides of the square property. And my parents would give me a big ball of string and tie one end to the end of our property, like one of the, fence posts for the horses, and say I could go as far as I want out and adventure in these open spaces, but I had to stay at the end of this string. And I love that attitude just for raising kids and having this, there should be boundaries and there should be safety, but, and they could probably see me. Also, the house was very tall and it was this big open field. But it just made me feel like I had all of this creativity to use. And then, actually, on a more personal note, I lost my grandfather this week, who was kind of the original hobby homesteader, and his father was actual homesteader. So there's complicated history with that and with equity and especially homesteads and people of color. But for me, it's a really special part of our family that we have kind of learned to work the Colorado land for 4 generations now. So even though it hasn't been any of our full-time job for 3 generations, it has been a huge part of our life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. It's amazing. So tell me a little bit about the journey from Broomfield kind of to where we are today. Was there schooling,
Yeah.
travel? What were the adventures that string
Schooling
it
and
together?
travel are pretty much what's in there. Yeah. So I lived in that same house. My parents still live there. I go often
That's awesome.
until college, and I looked at schools all over the country. I was pretty sure I wanted to do the Broadway thing. I'm a singer and I loved musical theater. So I was looking at schools that had great theater programs. And at that time, I'm really glad I didn't do this. I'm so thankful for people that do, but I thought I might want to go into counseling or psychology was kind of my backup option. I was fortunately encouraged by my dad. At the time, I was super mad about it, but he said, psychology and theater are two majors that don't typically make you a lot of money right after graduation. Maybe you should have one, whichever one's going to be your backup should be something a little bit more stable. So I decided to do a business major, and I ended up at CU after touring schools truly all the way from Seattle to New York City. I loved CU Boulder, and Boulder is gorgeous. I'm so thankful that I went there, but freshman and sophomore year, just really fell in love with business. And so still majored in theater all the way through. They have a surprisingly wonderful, small, little intimate theater program at CU Boulder. But I just fell in love with the impact that could be made through business, which I'm sure we'll talk a ton about. After school, I went on a year abroad. I was able to travel to 13 countries that year. On 3 continents.
Wow.
So I've actually now been to 28 countries on every continent except Antarctica. So I'm working on that one.
Wow.
And had the idea for the company before I left on that trip, my senior year at CU, and didn't really get started with it while I was abroad. But as you can imagine, I just can't recommend international travel, especially, staying with locals and learning a lot about the culture. I got to spend about a month in most of those countries, and it's a great way to learn more about the world, and it has shaped my perspective in huge ways. And then I came back, lived in that house in Broomfield for a while as I was starting the company. It's a huge privilege to be able to take no salary and live with your parents for a while if you can stand it, which I can. And then 2 years ago, I moved here to North Denver, just about 15 minutes away from home, but closer to downtown where I do a lot of my working and playing these days.
Hey everybody, this is Luke from Koolers Garage Doors. Just want to take a quick second to talk about our sponsor, Sommar Garage Door Openers. We believe Sommars are the best in the business when it comes to garage door openers. We always recommend them for residential installs because of the many features they have, such as Wi-Fi connectivity and safety features like a fixed chain that runs along a secure rail for a quiet and safe operation. Click the link to find out more about Sommar Garage Door Openers.
This is awesome. I love this story, and I love the context and how it's building in a moment, but not yet. I'm going to ask you about Simple Switch and
Great.
Get to share where this company is at today. Yeah.
I like that we didn't start there, though. Most podcast episodes are just tell us about Simple Switch, which is great. Don't get me wrong. I love to talk about it, but it's great to get the personal side too.
It really is. And what I love about it is the absolute context, because in these conversations, like at least from my observation, I can see where the experience in the present moment is perfect for what has built over the last decades. Like it all flies together. And so now I'm getting, for our listeners, Rachel, I haven't met before, and we had a little powwow before recording, but we jumped in pretty quick. And now I'm seeing broader context of Rachel growing up really rooted, like feet and hands in the ground, like grounded and rooted. But there's also like this deep, just generational understanding and appreciation. And it's bringing forth, we've mentioned a hobby homesteader, but there's some tenacity that's in that value.
Definitely.
that grinds into building a company that is really mission driven.
Yeah.
And to tee up this question, like, you have gone and traveled, but not just traveled to observe. You've gotten in to cultures, into people's, I would imagine, like concrete adobes, and lived, right? And really experience that. And so my question is, in those travels, like, what is one or two components that, whether it's an experience or an insight during that time, that has really shaped your paradigm of the world? Like, oh my gosh, without seeing, I'm relating to an immersive program that my wife and I went down to in Guatemala, and it was significant. Like, we're actually in a guest room, and we have the only 2 beds in the house. Like, they're giving up the beds. They're sleeping on cots and on the dirt floor, and they're comfortable as heck and just happy. And it's like, whoa, this is amazing. So out of your experience, I'm curious, like, are there 1 or 2 pieces that stand up and be like, okay, this has really shifted what I think I'm here to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think I could talk about this for the rest of my life. So I'll try to just pick a couple simple things. But one, I was traveling with a group of young adults and with an organization that I unfortunately don't really align with anymore. But my experience was very self-led, and the group of young adults I was with, I'm still extremely close with. But it gave us this opportunity to see organizations, I would say, both what I would consider fruitful and positive, and what I would consider negative. So organizations that, have the best intentions of charity, really, but have potentially caused, I would say, dependence on that charity instead of empowerment and kind of systems change. And I'm really fortunate. This is actually absolutely, I've learned so much about that from traveling, but I actually knew a lot about that before traveling, because that's something that my dad is really passionate about, and was very mindful about as I was growing up. He worked a lot here, locally downtown, with people who were under-resourced or underemployed, doing a lot of education and charity as well. But I think he had a really healthy view of when there's a wonderful documentary that I still really recommend to everyone. It's more than a decade old now. It's called Poverty Inc. And he made me watch that before going on this year. And it just talks a lot about systems change and, at the best, people going and having the best intentions, but then accidentally, having this butterfly effect. So giving shoes to people for free, but then those shoes don't hold up for very long. And unfortunately, now that they had shoes for free, the cobbler is out of, commission there. And, that just causes this effect. So while I was traveling, I was really keenly aware of that. Probably, I know to a degree that was somewhat obnoxious to my teammates, but they very quickly learned the value of that, and we would have really thoughtful, critical conversations. So our first month, for instance, was in India, and in talking to some business owners there, they had spotted this. Essentially, this community was almost fully funded by donations from the U.S., and they were fearful of that. These business owners, that when there's something that goes wrong in the economy for these donors, it's going to greatly affect them in ways that they don't have the tools to recover from. And so from that first month, just having this very entrepreneurial mind, I started just sitting down and having conversations with people that we were meeting with, asking them, if they wanted help, whatever help I could give, right? I'm not an expert. I was 23, and what can I help with your business plan? Should we run through some things? What are you really passionate about that could, support you and your family in the future? And that was a really cool experience in pretty much all of those countries, and everyone I've been to since. Well, a lot of the ones I've been to since have been less of an intentional stay there for a month and live there, so less than. But yeah, so I think that getting the opportunity to just talk with people starting businesses in different countries, that was a big reason that I got passionate about entrepreneurship and about Simple Switch, was an opportunity before that year abroad that I had to be a business consultant in South Africa, and watching my clients start companies and not get traction just because of the market that they had there locally, just didn't have really the money to spend on what they were selling, was really frustrating to me. And I think traveling has given me a good look into that and into just this high level system change and all of the factors, whether it be policy or economic factors that go into that. That's one.
Yeah.
I know that sounded like a lot of insights, but the other one that was a real game changer for me is I had the chance to go to Peru, actually. So that was a story about my first country that year. Peru was my last country, and I had the opportunity a couple of years ago to go back with my parents and stay with the same family in the same organization that I had stayed with when I was there. Really special. And something that I just thought was fascinating. For context, my parents are also entrepreneurs and own a real estate brokerage here in the Denver Boulder area, Hoist Real Estate, a family-owned and named business. And we were getting a tour in Peru from the family we were staying with. And it looked like a poorer neighborhood because a lot of the fronts of the houses were kind of unfinished, a little like shambly, things like that. And our host said this thing, which has just really gotten me for ever since, that in that area, there is a tax break, essentially, if you don't have to pay a certain property tax if your home is unfinished. And so he was explaining to us that this is actually one of the nicer areas. And inside, we got to visit. The houses are gorgeous. And it was absolutely, on par with my house at the very least. I'm constantly doing repair and DIY projects, which if you could see better, you would see all around me. But mine isn't because I'm being wise and focusing on tax breaks, and things like that. It's just, for home improvement. But I think that it reminds me of your story that you were given the 2 beds, but they were just comfy as can be. I think they were much more aware of what our expectations and norms would be. So they, gave you 2 beds to stay in. Whereas that might not be as important if they had, a Guatemalan visitor who maybe didn't care so much about that. So I think just the point for me there is just questioning biases, for lack of a better, phrase, but just thinking, oh, in my head, this pattern means this community is more poor, or they might be more sad, or they're less comfortable, and thinking, oh, actually, that's just based on how I was raised and has nothing to do with them, really. And I think it has caused me to be more open and ask more questions, which is all I can ever hope to do and continue to learn to do forever.
Yeah, I love that. Great perspectives. Your
Great
company,
question.
Simple Switch, started in 2017. Used terms like conscious purchasing and positive impact purchasing. Tell us a little bit about the mission that drives Simple Switch and a little bit of the functionality. How does it work?
Yeah, definitely. So Simple Switch, we are the online marketplace for ethical and sustainable shopping. So like you said, we're very focused on positive impact purchasing. The goal of the company is to shift the money that's already spent online, not to create more money spent online, but to shift that spending to products that are making a positive social and environmental impact. So it works the same as wherever you currently shop online. We get compared to, the sustainable Amazon or the ethical Amazon, or from our sexiest customers, Amazon with a heart often. And it is amazing to me how much impact we can make, right? Last year, and I met you because of the conference where I spoke about this on stage, actually. But last year, online spending was over $1 trillion for the first time. And if I remember correctly, million and trillion sound very similar. They're not. A million seconds is something like half an hour, but 1 trillion seconds is something like 3,000 years.
What?
Yeah, don't quote me on the exact numbers there, but it's that much of a span.
After this.
Yeah. It was something like million is, something under an hour. Billion is something like half a lifespan. So, something like 30 or 40 years. And then trillion is something like more than all of recorded history. So that kind of money, when we look at things like Elon Musk got in some kind of Twitter fight with I can't remember who. I want to say maybe World Relief Organization or one of those really large ones, because they said, okay, well, if you gave us, I'm really making these numbers up. I should have pulled this up. I didn't know I would talk about this. Something like if you give us $60 million a year or $60 billion a year or something like that, we would be able to just solve world hunger. So it feels really greedy that you wouldn't do that. And I don't know really how the fight ended, but I think that's the kind of thing that we can do with what we're already spending online, and certainly the ways that we're already spending other money as well. And there's so many other areas where we can shift our focus that way. But for me, the frustration with how easy it was to shop on Amazon, Walmart.com, from any major retailer and get that shipped to me, and that was so convenient and it really fit into my lifestyle, allowed me to pursue other things. And I think that's really powerful and positive. But it was nearly impossible when I decided I wanted to be a more conscious consumer and shop for more ethical, sustainable products. It took hours to find one product or to do the research on the certifications I needed to know about. And frankly, I think people tend to shame themselves for not knowing that information. And it's just not your job. It is now my job. But for me, bringing the simplicity and that convenience of online shopping that we're all used to was my mission, and it's been my mission ever since 2017, like you said. We also now sell to businesses, which I think puts this into perspective really well. We were working on closing a deal with a hotel who would be buying the products for their units from us instead of from all sorts of different places, kind of hodgepodge together. And just by switching their shampoo and conditioner with us, they would be saving 96,000 plastic bottles from going to the landfill every year. And that's one out of, 15 products that they might buy from us, including batteries and toilet paper and coffee for their guests. So that has been a really cool shift for several reasons. One is because it is way better for revenue for us. I've been an unpaid bootstrapped solo founder for almost 5 years now, and that's tough. So I'm still in that spot, and frankly, it's still very tough. But excited for some of these larger deals for that reason, which I like to speak up about because I think entrepreneurship is really glamorized a lot, and it can be very difficult.
Yes.
But then for me, it's that kind of impact at scale is so inspiring to see. Not only are the yous and me's met being able to shift our everyday spending and make that kind of social and environmental impact, but the businesses where we often go can be doing that same thing and on 1,000x scale. So I'm still very passionate about this, even though
it's a grind. Okay, real quick fact check.
Great.
So we can close the loop on this. 1,000 seconds ago is equal to 17 minutes. 12 days for a million seconds.
Okay, great.
And then I think it is important because, from a million to a billion to a trillion, like those are very significant. And I think that, media, we talk about billionaires and we just don't have the capacity in our minds to really understand the scale and scope of the difference.
Exactly.
But I'm glad you brought this up because now I'm fascinated.
Yeah.
A billion seconds is 31.7 years. So we go from a million, which is 12 days, to a billion, 31.7 years.
Yep.
A trillion, that's 31,709 years.
Oh, man. Yeah. So,
it's wild.
Just putting that into perspective, whether it be with billionaires versus, when we're thinking about policy, I often get the comment, so you want to be the next Jeff Bezos. And I don't even a little bit want to be the next Jeff Bezos, other than if he's done a great job, creating a consumer-focused company. That's what I do love about Amazon. And I always just say I'd rather be the next Yvon Chouinard, who recently gave more, I want to say all of his wealth to environmental nonprofits. And so that's the kind of example, right? We want to create this impact at scale, create this revenue at scale. We very intentionally are people plus planet plus profit, not just people and planet over profit. Because I believe the company will be better sustained and our impact will be better sustained, like we talked about at the beginning, right? not just through charity or just through passion and impact, although those things are really important, but also through a really rock solid business model. And whether for better or for worse, that's the world we live in. And so being able to sustain it through those tools is really important to me as well. But for that reason, it's not for personal wealth or for the wealth, of my investors, although I hope they make a great return. It is very much because we should be able to use the wealth that already exists to solve the problems we're facing.
Well, yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's an and type of equation there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's possible to earn a great profit and make a positive impact and support lifestyles and create this win-win-win-win forever and ever.
Yeah. Just an endless cycle. And we're getting better and better at it, which is awesome. It's just cool to see those things coming more into public sphere, but also just watching the science and technology catch up with those things to make them even more possible with circularity and all sorts of things.
Yeah. So basically, in summary, Rachel, if I'm hearing you correct, if I want to be a conscious consumer and I want to vote with my dollars and I want to support win-win-wins across the board and reduce, the kind of negative environmental impacts as much as possible. And yet, if I don't have 40 hours in my week to allocate towards research and understanding.
And who does,
the
right? If we all were doing that, nothing else would ever get done. Yeah.
That's right. So what I'm hearing is Simple Switch is curating that information for me.
Definitely. We have nearly 10,000 products, and it's things, I can spot 3 things, I think, in your background that you could buy from us, right? And certainly more. We joke that we can sell to any business with a bathroom or a break room, right? So there's a lot of just essentials products that I'm sure are already on your bank statement, so you can just switch. That's why we're called Simple Switch. But yes, that's one of the best things you can do, I think. And I'm probably a little biased, but let me say it's one of the best and easiest things that you can do is just making that simple switch. So I encourage, obviously, people to do that as often as you can.
Yeah.
And there's a website and mobile app. So whatever your shopping experience is,
love it.
However is easiest for you. That's the whole point.
What's the vision here? What happens in another 10 years, 20 years? Where are you going?
In my perfect world, I don't know about 20 years. That might be a little soon for this, but in my perfect world, it would be silly for me to even say that we are the ethical and sustainable marketplace because it's totally normal. There's just no reason that it can't be where that $1 trillion is going. So that's the vision overall. That's our why, is to normalize this kind of purchasing to, in the meantime, that looks like leveraging both personal and business spending towards this impact. And we play a big part in that by, through marketing and through curation, like what we're doing with Marketplace, but also through helping businesses especially leverage policy changes, right? If they are going to be incentivized or punished, depending on your city and how your voters are treating businesses, which I am a proponent of both, helping them take advantage of those things that are kind of the stair steps to this being the normal, right? Because there is also a lot of talk about equitable transition and making sure that the systems are there. For me, snapping my fingers and that being my expectation tomorrow would be, I think, unfair of me because I believe it's my job to create the system that makes it easier for you, Matt, or easier for, this hotel or whoever to be making those purchases. So that's kind of in the meantime is creating those stair steps that make it more realistic day by day, week by week, year by year, to make this the new normal.
Yeah. I love that. And it really is like systematic work.
It is.
That's how the norm becomes.
And the long game is a really interesting position to be in there because like recently I was interviewed for a magazine article, which I think they decided not to run. So that's interesting. But there was a conversation we had about, first of all, I really went hard on saying it's not the reader's job because the article was about spotting greenwashing. And don't get me wrong, it's great for us all to be educated about that. It's really important. But like I said, that's why systems like Simple Switch exist. That's why you have nonprofits in your area who are looking at local environmental and social policy that you can lean on and trust. Those are the those are the people
That's
that we are, that we should be leaning on and trusting. And anyone listening to this, you can DM me, Rachel from Simple Switch on Instagram anytime if you are, if you have a question or if you're just any questions you have. I love being the person to have those conversations with you and hopefully just find the answer for you. I don't think you need to become an expert. But the other thing that we talked about was progress over perfection. So when we are vetting a company or product, we look at 4 kind of main categories of social environmental impact in how it's made, how it's sent, how it's used, and how it's tossed. And so I think a lot of attention goes to from on the product side that kind of how it's tossed. Like, is it recyclable? Is it compostable? And those things are really important. But then there's also infrastructure questions for instance, my area just lost the ability to do industrial composting, for instance. And those things are really confusing. So helping consumers understand those things without making it this huge, like, just throw your hands up and give up, right? Because that kind of stuff, if there is a benefit to no one with consumers or businesses getting overwhelmed about these things. And so having that long view, one of our company values is growing a tamarisk tree every day. And a tamarisk tree is a wonderful tree in the Middle East that has all these benefits, like more shade and more humidity, which is obviously beneficial in that climate. But it takes 80 years to grow. So you're not really growing it for you, and you're not growing it for your kids. You're really growing it, generations down the line is who's going to benefit from it. So taking this long view means that sometimes we are, working with producers that don't have 100% of our metrics. Always, we're working with producers that don't have 100% of our metrics checked. So we are on purpose, not just a plastic-free marketplace. We're on purpose, not just a fights human trafficking marketplace. When you go on, and I should have mentioned this when you asked me how it works, but we have a shop by impact section on the website, and you can see most of the metrics we vet for. And it's everything from, Black-owned companies, because there's a really important aspect of equity and who owns the company and where that money is going. It's things like empowers people through employment. So in situations where there's labor exploitations, there can really just be the simple option of a better, fairly paid job. And that can be what solves, the problem for that person. But it might be, curbside recyclable packaging, things like that. And transparency around that is our big goal, not perfection. And that is an interesting thing sometimes to come into conversations with people who maybe have a little bit more strict guidelines about perfection in their mind. And I'm super excited that they're doing that. And I'm excited for them to implement that in their lifestyle, but not to exclude everyone else in those conversations, because those people are never going to take it that seriously or do the research to become that much of a perfectionist. So for me, having another one of our stated values is ease without apathy for that reason. And that's kind of what all of this boils down to is, it has to be easy and it has to be convenient. It's only sustainable if you can sustain it is another thing I've been saying often. So it was
amazing.
Long blab about those things, but for me, that's really important.
That's awesome. So simpleswitch.org. Yes,
that's right. .org or Simple Switch Ethical Shopping in the App Store and Android Store. And if you type in Simple Switch, we should be the first thing to come up. If not, for you, if your SEO doesn't put us at the top, it'll put us at the top for you by now. So that's it.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you shared some of your social links. We're going to include all of this in our show notes. And I'm going to encourage the listener to reach out, go check out the store.
Definitely.
I mean, you have a very well laid out website. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
And it seems very easy to use. And what I'm hearing is it's a great resource for families, but also businesses to be able to find products and goods and consumables.
Definitely. Yeah. And we didn't talk about this beforehand, but I'd be happy to put a discount code for show listeners, maybe Cooler Podcast at checkout. Does that feel like a good code? Okay. Cooler Podcast with a K. Those of you who are listening probably know that spelling already. But and then if you guys have a business in your life that you think should be buying from us and you're able to introduce us, I'd be happy to shoot you over a $20 gift card for that referral. I love empowering our consumers to be better consumers by also empowering them to be better advocates. So we meet that business and, do a free consultation, but it's really all about the impact. So if there's a business that you see that you wish was doing better, I would love for you to pass them along to me. You don't need to do the work. Just send me an intro.
Rachel, I love it. I love the mission. I really appreciate the way that you show up and the tenacity that you put into the world. I know that you had mentioned that entrepreneurship can be glorified, but it ain't easy.
That's right.
And it can be really, really challenging at times. I mean, there's benefits for sure, but it can be a lonely road for sure.
It sure can. And I'm really thankful to have great conversations like this. I think they make me feel less lonely, but I also have an awesome founder community here in the Denver Boulder area and in rural Colorado, like where I was introduced to this podcast in Salida, or I was recently in Telluride. Colorado's such a hub for authentic business conversations and some really great support systems. So very thankful for that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, kudos to you. I really appreciate our time together, Rachel. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to the Koolers Lifestyle Podcast. We count on your subscriptions, your likes, your shares, and I encourage you to do that now. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe, lower right-hand button. If you're on audio, download this, share it, and we look forward to having you on the next one.